So, I want to start today's video off, I guess, by leveling with you guys a bit. I have been pushing myself really hard to get these videos out, and it did kind of burn me out a bit. I will still continue to do them, but I might need to slow it down a little bit. That said, I did do a recent stream, and it did help quite a bit doing anything else besides GoldenEye. And that's also why I'm going to be following it up with the second part of the Nintendo theory, as I really just need a break from GoldenEye. So I may end up doing another stream here soon, probably to finish off Mario 64, since I almost did half the game last time, and maybe a bit more building in Minecraft. I'm really not sure. I haven't decided yet. I had hoped to be able to stream it on YouTube, but I was unaware that you need 25 followers for that. But hopefully we'll get to that point where I can stream on both Twitch and YouTube at the same time. And hopefully I can get my internet better where it doesn't skip around as much. But I'm not sure if there's a convenient fix for me at this exact moment. So please bear with me on that. With that said, I love to see what you guys are doing. Those of you who have shared what their passions are, just don't let it burn yourself out. You should do it because you want to, not because you have to. With that said, let's jump right into the video. So, in the last episode of the Nintendo theory, I talked about the split timelines of Ocarina of Time and why it's important that there has to be 3 timelines. And I wanted to follow that up with the direct connection in Star Fox. As some of you may know, there are 3 retellings of Star Fox, one of which being the SNES version, one being Star Fox 64 and the remake, as well the final being Star Fox Zero. And each one of them have a different fate for James McCloud, as well as different placements for the, quote, planets that you end up visiting along the way. And I feel like this episode might get a bit messy, as we've already split the timeline in the last episode, but I will do my best to make it coherent. So I'll go ahead and start this off with Star Fox for the NES. And very quickly we see the connection to Ocarina of Time, as in the second level of the game, after performing very specific maneuvers, you can summon Majora's Moon. This, of course, after being destroyed, opens up the warp to the black hole, which is a pre-existing point, which also happens to be the resting place of James McCloud in that timeline. Now, the follow-up question, which unfortunately I don't have an answer to, is whether or not Andros created the black hole as a way to recreate the sort of pocket dimension that the moon has inside it, or if those happen to be unrelated, and it just so happened that the moon decided to create the warp as a sort of self-defense mechanism to being destroyed, knowing that there was a black hole nearby. I do actually lean toward the latter, which I will cover more when I do Star Fox Zero. Which then begs the question as to how the moon is in Star Fox. If you recall, I had mentioned that in the Fallen timeline, I do not believe the moon destroyed, but rather shoved out into space. This is simply because, as mentioned before, in the Child timeline, the moon is destroyed, and in the adult timeline, those events never took place. In fact, Link never goes back to Termina to stop the moon in the first place, which would stand to reason that the only timeline in which the moon would have both existed and not be destroyed would be the Fallen timeline. Unfortunately, Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Zero are not so easy to place on the timeline, as there is no clear connection between the events of Star Fox 64 and 0 to Ocarina of Time. That said, though, given the events of Ocarina of Time, specifically the child timeline and the fallen timeline, I would like to believe that due to a sort of butterfly effect between games, that the events of Star Fox Zero take place on the child timeline, while the events of Star Fox 64 take place on the adult timeline. However, this could easily be argued, and I would certainly love to hear your theories in the comments below. Regardless, I have to note that a lot of the similarities end up coming from the fate of James McCloud, as in the original Star Fox, as I mentioned before, James McCloud is presumed to be inside the black hole as part of a space graveyard. And similarly, in Star Fox Zero, James is also inside the black hole. However, it should be noted that unlike Star Fox, James has managed to sort of cast his spirit outside the black hole. It's Star Fox, it's kind of complicated when it comes to James McCloud. It's probably best not to think too much about it in the long run, despite me doing exactly that. That said, though, unlike Star Fox 64, Andros is aware of James's presence during the final sequence of the game, and perhaps he would have been too in Star Fox 64 had he not blown himself up at the end of the boss battle. And while I am kind of keeping this video somewhat short, as a change of pace from the GoldenEye videos, I do, however, want to talk about one specific boss. And the boss is a recurring boss, specifically from the 64 timeline. And that boss is Sorcerer. Some of you may know this boss better as the UFO boss from Katina, although it does reappear later in Assault. And looking at the official guide for the game, it does specifically note that this saucer came from a different galaxy far, far away, and in this case, not the Star Wars universe, which I, of course, have to ask as a question for now as to where that flying saucer came from. And perhaps we can tie that to another gaming franchise and sort of build a interconnected web of games and possibly even timelines. And while I do have my own theories as to where Sorcerer's design would have come from, as it is noted it's a blueprint and not confirmed to be an officially built construct, I want to, in the next video, break down its design and perhaps link it to a plausible source, of which I have my own suspicions, but for the sake of proper research, we'll save that for an actual breakdown in the next episode. Until then, have a fantastic evening. Bye-bye.